What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Ableton Music Producer Podcast. This is Dan Giffin. Today, my guest is Zach Montoya. He is a part of the bass house pop duo called Syence. He's also the lead instructor and content curator at Hyperbits, where he teaches a lot of Ableton and music production hacks, mixing, mastering. There's a lot of good resources in the show notes as well if you want to go deeper with his training. His duo Syence has been doing well. They hit Spotify's global viral charts, performed at Snowglobe Music Festival, and continue to grow their audience in the bass pop genre. Their latest single, Little Bit Bored, was released in February with the German pop singer Ruuth. It went viral, generated more than 20 million plays on Triller prior to the release. The duo signed to a label, Hitco Entertainment, which also has the likes of Jenifer Lopez, St. John, Outkast, Big Boy, and also have signed with Paradigm Talent Agency representing Zedd, Skrillex, Disclosure, many other great artists. So they're on the up and up, and I was excited to have Zach on the podcast. In this episode, we share a lot of really good insights on music production, how important it is to have a good team to support your music career, what it's like being in a producer duo, and thoughts on SoundCloud versus Spotify, different resources he's made to level up your music production. A lot of random good conversation in this episode, so stick around. Make sure you listen all the way through, especially towards the end. But before we jump into all the goodness in today's episode, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors at melodics.com. If you haven't heard for the billionth time, Melodics is that desktop app that you can plug in almost any MIDI controller and grow your skills and have fun practicing, whether you own a push-to MIDI controller or an electronic drum set, or you own a MIDI keyboard and just want to practice your scales, get better at playing keys. There's a lot of really great lessons and a huge variety of genres. Encourage you to check it out for free at melodics.com. That's melodics.com. And if you decide to take the plunge and want to sign up for their subscription, definitely worth it. You get a lot more options and content to go deeper with your training, growing your skills. If you want to do that, use the discount code LPO-20. It's LPO-20. Save 20% because saving money is awesome. Also, if you didn't know, I have a Discord server and I would love for you to join. There's a lot of good threads in there talking about music production, Ableton, Max for Live devices. We get real nerdy. And you can join by going to liveproducersonline.com/discord. Also, if you haven't liked, followed, subscribed on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, if you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review on Apple or wherever you're listening. And it would really help me out a lot. Share it with your friends, your mom, your grandma, anybody you know that uses Ableton. And last but not least, join the newsletter. You'll get the latest episodes and new Ableton training and content and things that I'm pushing out into the universe. Go to liveproducersonline.com/newsletter. That's enough of that. Let's go ahead and jump into today's episode with Zach. And yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. Zach, what's up, man?
Yo, what's up, Dan? How you doing?
I'm super good. How are you?
Doing well. Just working away. Busy time of the year.
I feel that completely. Yeah, thanks for joining the podcast, man. It's good to actually meet you.
Yeah, of course, man. Looking forward to chatting.
I see that you changed your background. I just watched a podcast with you and Braden. It was called The Bringing It Back, I think.
Oh, yeah. We just did that a bit ago. Yeah, I actually just moved. That was my old studio, my old house, and I just moved literally as of last week. So this is like my new setup. Similar, but a little bit different. It's like a studio. I live by myself now versus like in a house with other dudes.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but every time I've moved, it takes me a while to nest. I have to like rearrange everything in the studio like 14 times before I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I have like a pretty formulaic way I like my studio setup, so that part was easy, but it was definitely challenging. Like moving is just so stressful in general, and there were a couple of things about this place in particular that I had to like figure out, which took a while. It was like 2 weeks out of my life of stress, but it's officially over at this point, which is good.
Yeah, for sure.
You're still at now?
I'm in Indianapolis.
Oh, okay, cool.
It's a magical place if you like corn and flatland and race cars. Racing is big. Yeah, it's the only reason people really come here is just for the racing. Indy 500.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, Ricky Bobby. You ever watch Talladega Nights? Yeah,
that
It's
movie?
based on a true story in Indianapolis.
Oh, really? I don't know that.
No, it's not. It's just
Oh,
it's
okay.
yeah, but it's pretty accurate.
Sure, there's many stories like that.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, but you're still in LA, right? I think you said
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I'm in. I just moved like a couple of neighborhoods over into a place called Westwood. I was in
Oh,
Hollywood.
cool. Actually, my manager knows two of the agents really well at Wasserman because you guys are signed on Wasserman, right? The
Yeah.
agency. They kind of broke off from Paradigm, but that probably hasn't affected you guys at all.
No, yeah, we signed with Lee, and then he has like a right hand man named Len. So
Yeah.
they signed us when Paradigm was still a thing, and then literally within like 6 months, it switched over to Wasserman. So it didn't like affect us really at all because we're still kind of in the developmental phase
Mhm.
and growing. But yeah, no, it's been great. They're awesome guys.
Yeah, you guys have been playing some really cool festivals. Seems like you've been growing a lot. I saw you guys hit 3 million Spotify plays. Congrats on that. That's dope.
Yeah, on that one record, and then we hit like 1 million on the other record. Yeah, we're definitely growing. I mean, you know how it is. It's like the grind of like slow growth, and then like we're hoping, one of our records coming out here in the next like year just like pops off more, and we just get a little bit more recognizable. But yeah, the touring helps, the general networking in the industry helps. Like just
Yeah.
the more exposure your brand can get, just the bigger buzz and bubble you create, that's all super important.
Yeah, for sure. Well, your music's dope. And so you teach through Hyperbits, or you kind of started your own thing.
No. So I'm the lead instructor of the Hyperbits masterclass. So like Sarek is the founder of
Right.
hyperbits.com and like kind of the head honcho, but I'm like sort of the guy in charge of all of the content. I'm essentially my role at the company is lead content curator and lead instructor. So like
Okay.
I basically make all of the resources, all of the production content, all the like educational content, and I teach the masterclass, which is sort of like my baby at this point in terms of like, helping producers improve. So yeah, that's kind of my main job, I guess, outside of, the stuff I do for Syence and like engineering and all that, which we can get into. But
Yeah.
yeah, I work really closely with Sarek on all that stuff.
Yeah, he's the one that actually introduced me to you in the first place because I was going to have him on the podcast, and it's the Ableton music producer podcast, obviously, but he doesn't use Ableton. So I was like, do you know anybody else? And he's like, Zach's the man. So yeah,
Yeah.
man, thanks for joining again. Appreciate it. How did you get into Ableton Live, or maybe share a little more of your musical background before that?
Yeah, well, I've been making music for probably like, I guess it's been a little over 10 years at this point, so I've been doing it for a long time. And originally I started in Logic 9, I think it was, or Logic
Okay.
8, I can't remember. I basically just got software from my like stepdad for Christmas, and he was like, "Hey, like you like music, you should try making music." And I just had no idea what it was. I think I made like two like stock like loopy beats that were like hip hoppy beats. Like it was just so bad. You know how it is.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I kind of like I was really obsessed with, this was like end of high school. I was really into bands like Passion Pit and Phoenix and like artists like Kid Cudi. So I was making like kind of indie sort of electronica shit. Like I basically also, sorry, if I curse, if we're not supposed to curse.
This is a PG-13 podcast. You're fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
that's good.
So basically, like I started in college freshman year. I actually, that's where I met Braden, who's the other guy in Syence, and we started like making these random, like almost more like band oriented songs. Like I would plug in my bass and would play random synths that were stock to Logic. I had no idea what mixing was, what EQs or compressors. Like I knew everything I made sounded awful, but compositionally, I was like, oh, like this is a cool idea. And we probably made like, I mean, it was mainly me at this point. He wasn't really working that closely with me. He dabbled, but I probably made 50 to 100 songs like that. And then that's right when the electronic music was booming. This was like 2011, 2012. So I started to really fall in love with artists like Porter Robinson, Madeon, Skrillex, Dylan Francis, all these guys that were like coming up on the scene big right then.
Yeah.
And I found out they pretty much all used not Logic, like the software, and most of them were either FL Studio or Ableton. And I downloaded a trial of Ableton, and I just kind of like fell in love with it right away. I just sort of was like, wow, this is so much better. And There was actually, I can't remember what it was called, but I downloaded some course on Ableton, and it was just a really well put together course at the time. I think this was like Ableton 8, I want to say, or Ableton 9. It was a while ago.
Yeah.
And it just like, it got me really up to speed fast, and it started to introduce me to mixing. And I think it was because of that I started to realize like, oh, if I want to actually make electronic music and I want it to sound better, I should probably use Ableton, which, is obviously pretty naive. Like looking back, like it doesn't matter what DAW you use. Like you can make the dopest shit in the world on any DAW, like if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But Ableton definitely has its advantages for like sound design, and there was a lot of resources at the time because Ableton was blowing up. So that was kind of my introduction to it. And then I just like straight up was obsessed from like end of freshman year into sophomore year of college all the way till now. Basically, I've just been nonstop making music as much time as I can get in Ableton. I picked up Pro Tools later on because I started recording vocals, and at the time Ableton just didn't have any sort of comping feature. Now it does, which I haven't spent any time looking into, but I might spend some time and try to like stop using Pro Tools just because it would be convenient. But yeah, that's kind of like how I got into it, and I've just sort of developed alongside Ableton. And now that I teach in the master class and teach so many students and kind of go over the fundamentals so frequently, I feel like I'm just like an absolute expert in everything Ableton, at least from a production and mixing standpoint. From like a live performance standpoint, I know a lot, but I very rarely am in like scene mode, or I think it's session mode.
Session
mode. I'm very rarely using that just because I produce like linearly from like an arrangement view.
Mm-hmm.
So other than that small aspect of Ableton, every other aspect, I feel like I'm a living walking manual like of Ableton. Like I've just because I've been doing it so long. So I just feel like I know everything other than maybe like random new features in the newer versions, like plugins I don't ever use that come out. I'm not going to spend a ton of time, diving through Wavetable, the synth, because like I don't use it. I use Serum and Atmosphere and other stuff.
Yeah. I feel like we have a lot of similarities in how I grew up in Ableton as well. I started in version 8 and went to Dubspot in New York City and kind of fell in love with it pretty quickly. And I felt like a producer in GarageBand, just like dragging loops together. And then I was doing the same thing. I was researching. I was like, what is Skrillex using? And what all these people using and whatever. And Ableton was just the GOAT for any kind of electronic music. It still kind of is, really. Yeah, man, good stuff. You also went to Pure Mind, right? I saw an interview with you back in the day, and you were talking about you studied there.
Yeah, so right after we graduated college, so I did engineering in school alongside Braden as well. I did aerospace and he did industrial. So I knew I didn't want to work in engineering. I was like, I know I want to figure out a way to make a living in music. And this is right when I had started working with Sarek with the masterclass. It definitely wasn't where it is now, and we were still kind of developing our relationship. But I knew a combination of that and just some money I had saved and some help from some family, I was kind of like, well, if there's anything I can get better at in music production right now, it's just like fully immersing myself in some sort of environment where all I'm doing 24/7 is talking about music production and like engineering and getting the ears trained better. And I knew I wanted to go to one of these, year-long music production schools. I was kind of debating between Icon and LA because it was, starting to pop off at the time. This was like 2015, 2016. And then Pure Mind, because I wanted to stay in California. And those are pretty much like the only two decent ones. Most of my it was honestly just happened to be because everyone I knew from college moved to the Bay Area. Like literally every one of my best friends, including Braden. So I figured, hey, I'll move to San Francisco for a year. I'll go to Pure Mind. I'll, get really, really good at engineering and producing music. And we'll continue to develop Syence. And hopefully a combination of that plus, some luck will start to build momentum. And, frankly, it worked out in itself. I feel like looking back, it would have made way more sense for me to move to LA right then and there and to just start grinding out here, because LA is definitely the hub for electronic music and just music in general.
Yeah.
But it worked out. I got to get closer with Braden, spend a lot of time with him. We lived together, so we made a lot of music. I got way better. The main thing at Pure Mind that I took advantage of was their studios. They have really dope spaces to work in, perfectly treated rooms for the most part. So my ear just got a lot better at understanding what a really transparent environment is like. Because use those studios all the time. I was one of the only kids, I feel like, in the whole program who was obsessively like taking it super, super serious and like going as often as possible. There were two
Yeah.
other guys with me that I would work with a lot. And anyway, we just like, I got really good, I think, out there, a lot better at engineering side. It was mainly just getting to use the studio space, which helped me a lot.
Yeah.
And it just kind of timeline worked out. Ended up moving to LA about a year and a half after that. And then, we had management at the time. She was local out here in LA, started introing us, and just, started building up Syence and the whole networking side of the industry from there.
Yeah, totally. When I was, in New York going to school, I think one of the greatest advantages outside of the classroom and just like growing new brain cells was the community. I'm sure that was the same way for you, just being in an environment with a bunch of people who are also that because that is going to teach you in alone itself, just being surrounded by other people and just talking about random stuff, but also just having that network and people to collaborate with and just being saturated in that environment. I feel like inspires creativity.
100%. It literally felt like straight up like I was in Disneyland every day, especially for the first like 6 months, because at this point in my life, I'm just obsessed with music production and making it a full-time career. Yeah. Every aspect about it, like it's all even when I wasn't working during the day. I'm a pretty social guy. I have a lot of friends, and I would definitely like hang out with a lot of people and go out and stuff like that. But all of the time I spent by myself was pretty much either obsessing over artists and music and their brands and their growth and what they're doing, or obsessing over making music and building my brand and doing what I'm doing. So it was kind of just like, the perfect environment to put myself in, to just continue the inspiration in my head to push through. And with the music industry, and especially trying to develop and build an electronic pop crossover act right now, it is just so difficult. Like there's so many hats you have to wear until you get to a certain level and you have other people to help. And there's just so much that goes into it. So it shocks me that people even become successful having not had like the luck I had and the setup I had, because even with what I had, like the how fortunate I was, it's still like next to impossible what we're trying to do. And it's still every day we have hardship. It's like, it's not, as much as anything looks like on social media or online, this is a really hard industry to be in, and it just takes forever, and there's not a lot of instant gratification. So, it's definitely like, I'm glad it all worked out in San Francisco, and glad I went to Pure Mind. I wouldn't have changed a thing for sure, but I'm definitely much more happy that I'm in LA now doing it out here. It's definitely a better place.
No, it shows that you're grinding, though. It seems like you guys have been making some great moves, and obviously the numbers and the shows that you've been doing. It seems like you guys have some good things on the way too, and working on a lot of new music. I've been,
definitely lots of stuff on the horizon for sure.
Yeah, having a good team is huge too. Now that you guys are signed with Wasserman and having agents that are doing shows and kind of taking some of that extra work off your back.
Yeah, agents are obviously a must for when you start to have a big enough presence to play gigs, but management is also huge. And
for sure,
we've been super fortunate with all of the management we've had, not only in the past, but currently. And that's honestly been probably the primary thing that's driven. Obviously, our music and what we do and our art is first, but right next to that, in a close second, I'd say is like the team we've built and the just the energy that's put into developing our brand, and to relentlessly every day be thinking about it, doing everything in our power to improve it, and just to not slow down, even if sometimes it seems like nothing's growing, nothing's happening, we're just kind of like coasting. It's a long game. It's definitely, I think, one of I forgot who said it, but someone on our team at one point was like, when we were first starting, was like, we all believe in this project. It's definitely more of a marathon, not a sprint. Like you really got to just look at the long-term picture and work towards that, versus, just like, like we used to, I think when we first started, it used to be like our main goal was like, we really want to play Coachella. And like, we obviously, because that's where we met, or that's not where we met, but that's where we decided to kind of, me and Braden, to start Syence. And it was actually at a Zedd show. I mentioned this in the other interview. I don't know if you saw, but basically, like, that's such a minor. It's a great. It'd be awesome, right? Playing Coachella is it's one of the biggest festivals in the world, so it's definitely a great milestone for any artist. But like on the scale of what you can make in the music industry, it's really like a small thing, right? Like it's one show, one festival. You know, you might not even get paid to play it. Certain people like don't, right? Because it's so much exposure. They don't even pay some of the artists that end up playing early in the day. That's definitely still a goal, and we're really hoping that's going to happen soon. But the whole perspective just changes as you get more and more serious, and you start to see longevity and long-term goals that are way bigger and cooler than something like just playing a festival. But it just goes to show like how, as you develop as an artist and start to understand the industry more and how things really work, it really changes kind of your perspective and what you want and what your goals are, which has been happening a lot for us recently because we've really just been like, pushing forward into these different categories and levels, and it just unlocks, whole other opportunities.
Yeah, it's kind of funny too, because like I'm sure you've experienced this where you having a goal, which I think is really important as a producer, performing artist, whoever, any creative. I think having goals is important because it's a motivator, right? It pushes you. But once you reach that goal, sometimes it's kind of like, okay, now what? You know what I mean? So it's like, I think like it's good to continue to keep pushing yourself and try to reach higher and higher goals. But I think like it's easy almost sometimes, even when you reach those bigger goals and you're like, oh shit, like I did this, I made it or whatever. And then it's like, okay, what now?
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's funny because I fortunately like just now our development and like networking, I've had the pleasure of meeting and becoming friends with, really dope artists, like guys like Zedd and his Anton and, the Loud Luxury guys and Two Friends and all these really dope artists who are killing it right now and have just amazing careers.
Yeah.
And even with them, it's like you'd think you get to a certain point and you're like, oh yes, like I did it, like I'm satisfied, but it's just, it doesn't exist. Like that's not what humans are like, right? Like we always want more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting because, and I, even on a way smaller level, we felt that like we used to look at, our Spotify monthly listeners and we're like, oh wow, like if we could have like 100,000, that'd be so sick. And now it's like, I'm like, oh God, we have 100,000. I'm depressed. It's like completely, readjust once you're there. This really is a thing with shows, like, looking at the shows we've been able to play this year compared to where we were 2 years ago, if I could like instantly have seen that, I would have been like, holy crap, that's so awesome. Like you must be so stoked. And it's not that I'm not completely stoked and excited. It's just that every little taste of, moving forward makes you just look at that next step and you just kind of keep, and it's great because it's the fuel that drives your growth, in this industry that's very relentless and negative half the time. And if you don't have that energy, you're just not going to make it. And you might like have little moments of success, but to really get there, you have to just relentlessly like keep going no matter what. And it's just crazy because I would have never thought that I'd look at, a situation and be like, oh, like this is sick, but like this is going to be way cooler. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Definitely. 100%. I think, with that, it constantly forces me whenever I do reach that big aha moment to kind of sit back and be like, why did I originally get into this in the first place? And it's really just for the love of making the music, really. And that's why we do it, right? It's because that creative love, that like expression of ourselves, then we get to put it on the world and then connect with other people, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, 100%. And that helps, like, that kind of sentiment really, and I talk this all the time to the students I teach with the Hyperbits masterclass, like, finding that thing that is a propelling you to make your art is probably, and to keep focused on that is probably one of the hardest things as you start to actually see success, because you just, it's really easy to shift gears if there's fancy things like put in your face, right? Like things that are cool and exciting. But 100%. Like when I'm by myself in my element in my room, just like absorbed into my screen with, playing melodies and listening to music, like that is my main like love, right? That's like my first love. It's like what I want to be doing all the time. So just remembering that and remembering that all this other fancy stuff and all the like business side and, making money and all that stuff, it's just kind of like another thing. It's like a separate part of the equation. The first thing you always have to satisfy is just that feeding your, your creative soul, or call it or whatever, and I'm very creative, and I definitely consider myself, like an artist and someone who uses music as a medium to like showcase what I'm feeling, or like, whatever it is. Sometimes I don't even know how to describe it. It's just like, I just do it because it feels like I'm supposed to be doing it, and like it works and it's fun. So I think, you can you can spend a lot of time in that world and and that's why, a lot of the students I work with don't even pursue careers like in music necessarily. They're doing this and getting better for fun and just to get better at their hobby.
Yeah.
But it's got to start like that, and hopefully it's got to stay like that forever, and the other stuff will hopefully kind of grow alongside it so that you can hopefully all you have to do all day every day is do that, which is my goal, obviously.
Yeah, that's the dream we're all working towards. Well, I know you also teach, obviously, and I teach Ableton too, so I was hoping we can nerd out a little bit on your production process.
Yeah, for sure.
I know that you're part of this producer duo with Braden. Do you focus more on one area or aspect of the producing, such as like drums or rhythm or composition or sound design, and then maybe he plays more of other things? Do you find that's helpful, like being in a duo to play off of each other like that?
Yeah, so our duo is a little different than that in the sense that, I started producing and making music 10 years ago. Braden has only really started making music on his own for like the last like 3 or 4 years. So we're just in completely different worlds in terms of, what I am capable of versus what he's capable of from like a sonic perspective. Like my ears are just way more developed. So when it comes to sound design or mixing or composition or pretty much all of the main pillars of producing music, I'm definitely kind of like the main honcho, and that's sort of my role in Syence is to like get my artistic vision to light. With that being said, it doesn't mean that he isn't heavily contributing. Making music for 4 years, that he's been doing, like he's definitely way better. And like he's definitely capable of making songs from scratch, not necessarily engineering or making them sound up to the caliber of what our Syence music sounds like, because that's my job. But all the time, like he'll start an idea or, he's been really into the last kind of year making more like house oriented music. So a lot of what he does is like more of like our edits for live shows or remixes. He'll like start little loop ideas or, whether it's content for TikTok or anything that's just like more dance oriented in like the house space. He's definitely very capable of making ideas, and we'll kind of feed off of that. And if I like something, I'll take elements of it or the whole session and then do my thing. But when it comes to like original Syence music, pretty much every song starts the same way. Like I'll either have a session with a vocalist and we'll write something from scratch to like chords, or I'll start producing a beat while we write. That honestly hasn't happened in like off and on it's happened, but that hasn't been like a main thing for like 2 years because of COVID, and just because of our size. Now what our main process is we just get tons and tons of top lines, like vocals sent to us, and we pick the ones we like. We talk to whoever was involved in writing and creating it, and we try to come to some sort of like, hey, we'd like to work on this for a Syence song. And if they're cool with it, I download the acapella, and I usually start the initial process. Like I'll kind of do that creative like grind by myself of like coming up with the main production elements, like the composition, the sound design, the basic ideas, the drop, kind of like, everything that from like a seasoned producer standpoint, you listen and you're basically like, okay, the song's done. Like I got to go in and, finish it off and take it to the finish it line, but it's basically there. And once I get that, I usually send it to Braden, and he'll be like, okay, love this, hate this. Like we should maybe try this. And then he'll either come to sessions and we'll work on it together, finishing it off, or I'll just finish it off because I have more time than he does, because he still works like a normal 9 to 5 full. I mean, I kind of do too with Sarek, but there's a little more flexibility with like, I don't work on Fridays, for instance.
Yeah.
So basically like I'll work on stuff and, I'll send it back to him and we go back and forth, and that's kind of been our process, and it just works because frankly, having 2 cooks in the kitchen, unless you're perfectly in sync, I think is almost more damaging than not. It's almost better once you get to a certain like caliber of production and artistic like vision to just do you as individuals and then collaborate after you've done you for a little bit,
Yeah. I'm the same way too. Whenever I collab, like it's hit or miss being in the room with somebody, because you're right. Sometimes you're in sync, sometimes you're not. Sometimes, the other person's had too many drinks or whatever, you just never know. And it's nice to sit on something and just kind of develop it until you're happy with it.
Yeah, and fortunately, there's so much else to do in Syence that Braden has become, a huge component on those things, right? Like, for instance, I very rarely am like building DJ sets because Braden comes from a DJ background. Like, that's how we fueled our forces. Like I was producing music, he was DJing fraternity parties. We made a duo. And so Braden is the guy who, whenever we have a show, he's creating a set. Like he listens to new music every day. He has thousands and thousands of songs and he memorizes them all. It's crazy. Like I've never met someone who knows as many songs and artists as this guy. And like he'll just make a ton of sets, send it to me. I'll be like, okay, love this. I don't like these 4 songs. Let's replace them. And, we'll do that. So he sort of does the DJ stuff. I sort of do the producing and making the songs. And then we both kind of collaborate on all the other aspects. However, I will say he probably spends a little bit more time on like social media development than I do, just because making music takes a lot more time than like making DJ sets, for instance. So I'm just, spending a little bit more time doing that when we are working on songs. But it's a very like, we always talk about how we have a very yin yang relationship. And I think that's like essential for anytime you're not by yourself. It's just like whatever my shortcomings are, it's his strengths, and his shortcomings are my strengths. And I think that's why we're starting to see success, and why I think we're going to be successful. Where I know we're going to be successful, because there's no better person out there for me to be working with right now. Because I get to do me and get to do my art. And he gets to do him and do his art. And then we get to, cordially collaborate and make sure that we're both happy. And I think one important thing to note is, just because I'm like kind of the main side of the production and starting a lot of our originals and all that, we both have to agree on the final product. End of story. Like if he doesn't like something, even if I'm obsessed with it, we won't push forward with it. And I think that's been able to help us level up our music, because there's been plenty of times I'm satisfied and he's not, or he's satisfied and I'm not. And we each have to work towards making the other person satisfied, but still retaining a love for whatever we're working on. And that makes it so that our music's even better, because it's always better to satisfy two brains versus one when it comes to art, in my opinion. It means it's more like universally acceptable, which is a part of our goal in our, what we're trying to do.
Totally. I think it's really important to have that trusted feedback from somebody else like that. That's definitely probably really helped develop your sound and just even put out more high quality content for sure. And also, you talked about top lines, getting vocals and stuff. Where do you typically grab that from? Because I notice you do a lot of flips with vocals, or like even pop songs that have already been released, and you'll just like strip out the vocals. Do you rip that off of like a YouTube acapella and then do a remix, or like where do you typically find these vocal tracks?
I mean, it kind of depends on the on the situation. Like if it's a remix, we are usually getting the stems sent to us by the original artist. Like for instance, we just did a remix with Atlantic for Noah Carell, and she did this song "Please Don't Suck," and we we're in communication with the label, so they paid us to do a remix. So that'll happen when it's like an official release on Spotify. But things for SoundCloud, I mean, it's all of the above. It's Googling something acapella. It's utilizing those services that exist out there. I think there's one called like Vocaler that we use, or Voxy. There's so many of them. It's like hard to remember. And often Braden's the one finding them or making them, but they have services. You literally you download or rip something, you put it in, and then it'll spit out like vocal, drums, like bass or whatever. It's like a random services. It's a combination of all that. And a lot of times you can just like find acapellas on like YouTube or online. But for the most part, it's, anything on SoundCloud. Like we're about to release in December, we're doing this like spin-off of the 12 Days of Christmas, and we're doing kind of this 12 Days of Science experiments. And for 12 days in a row, we're releasing live edits that we've made, mashups that we've made, total remixes of songs. Like we've got remixes of like the Donda Chant from Kanye, and Sun Goes Down, and a mashup with like a bunch of songs, and it's cool. So it's a bunch of cool stuff, and most of those acapellas we just got from the internet. Just like Googling it, searching it, or finding it. And it's pretty, straightforward. But if you ever want to put something out legitimately and not risk it and take it down, you have to get permission from the label. And
definitely,
we've fortunately been able to do some remixes like that. It's just kind of, hit or miss how often it happens, and how like legit it is. Like it's almost like we could spend time working on remixes or more originals, and it's just sort of like you got to spend your time evenly.
I mean, that's how a lot of artists came up on SoundCloud, right? It was just remixing other artists.
Yeah, and it still I mean, like, I feel like it doesn't happen, but I wanna say it still happens. I honestly like, SoundCloud is still an active platform, but, we definitely missed the SoundCloud boom, like,
Oh, yeah, I mean
our numbers, like, the stream counts of our music relative to our follower count is absurd compared to some of the other ones, like, there's people out there with, like, 80,000 followers on SoundCloud, and they don't even have a single song that's gotten 1,000,000 plays on SoundCloud.
Yeah.
So, like, I think there just used to be kind of this incentive because everyone was actively on SoundCloud, like, finding new music to, like, follow people and follow for follow, and the repost chains were really big, and, it's still a platform worth using, but it's definitely not our, focus. I actually think it's our most we have the most followers on that platform of any followers. I think we're at, like, 8,000 something. But, like, yeah, it's a bummer because we, like, look at our music. If we had been able to do our whole thing that we were doing right now, maybe like 1 to 2 years earlier, I feel like it would have really helped us grow because of the SoundCloud bubble that was happening back then.
Oh, totally. Yeah. SoundCloud is not really on the growth trajectory as it used to be, but I still think it's a great way to, like, connect with artists or, like, at least remix artists and get noticed. I have arguments with all my music friends, which is better, SoundCloud or Spotify. I still think Spotify is way better.
I mean, better, like,
from the algorithm and the quality of audio streaming. That's my argument.
Oh, I mean, algorithm, Spotify. I mean, you can't even, anyone defending SoundCloud is just clearly doesn't know what they're talking about because it's like Spotify is just in a different league. That would be like comparing Apple to like a mid-tier computer company that makes like lower tier computers for people. Like, it's just not.
Yeah.
Just because, and I'm not saying, and that's not like a diss on SoundCloud. They're a great platform. They just don't have the same resources as Spotify. They're not even near the size of a company in terms of like money. So, plus Spotify kills it with curated playlists. Like, and
the Discover Weekly and all that stuff.
Like, I don't even know anyone who uses SoundCloud's like main page to find music. They pretty much just look at their feed. And like, I mean, that's what Braden does, for instance. That's how we find a lot of cool new music. But no, I mean, and hopefully no SoundCloud reps are going to listen to this and just hate me forever and never help us. But yeah, I mean, no, Spotify's definitely, and in the industry, having 1 million monthly listeners on Spotify is way more impactful in getting booked for performances than having 20,000 followers on SoundCloud or whatever, or having songs that have millions of plays on SoundCloud, because it's just not the same world.
It's true.
Yeah, but yeah, it's good point though.
And now you have Tidal and all these other like streaming platforms.
Yeah.
And Apple's apparently going lossless. There's
interesting.
Yeah, you kind of have to be everywhere all the time now, it seems. Anyway, cool. So I also saw some of your TikToks. You're posting like beats and things and how you made them. I saw that you were using like Serum. I'd love to talk about some of the tools and plugins that you use as well.
Yeah. Sorry, we were supposed to nerd out earlier, and I went on a tangent. But totally.
This podcast. This is the Tangent Podcast. You're in a good place. As far as like native Ableton stock devices, like what are some of your go-to effects or instruments?
Yeah, so instruments wise, not a lot. I mean, I'll use like a drum rack occasionally, which I get is like a sampler, simpler. But honestly, I hardly use those anymore. But effects, definitely. Like, I use the built-in Ableton saturator a ton.
Yeah.
Obviously, the built-in EQ is great. But probably the most used is the and that's most impactful on the sound quality and the sonics of like the Syence sound is the multi-band compressor. Mm-hmm. Specifically variations to the OTT setting. I talk all the time in the masterclass, and we actually have a bunch of cool free resources that, Dan, you could probably link in the video here. But like we have a ton of insight into really quick and easy ways to just level up your production. We have like this one thing called the 50 mixing mastering tips. It's like a PDF, and it's just 50 tips of things you can do. And a lot of those are native DAW things you can do. And one of them is, using like a multiband compressor in Ableton, especially because it just sounds great, and taking that OTT as a starting point, but then manipulating it. And I've got this one way I manipulate it. I actually kind of ripped it from this artist named Company. Are you familiar with him?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, Company's dope.
Yeah. So I don't love rhythm or all the kind of music that much that he makes, but the sound quality of that kind of those genres to me is just like so awesome. Like, I really want to take that kind of in your face, like, wow, this sounds crazy, to like more pop music, which is, I think a lot of people are doing nowadays. But one of the ways he gets that sound is by smashing the living crap out of everything. But if you use OTT too aggressively, it's too smashed. So there's ways to like back off on the OTT, like essentially not OTT the top end, only OTT the middle and the bottom, and to do it in parallel. And when you do that, you basically like bring to the front any sound, like the main part that the ear wants to hear to make it feel full, but you leave the top bright, kind of like too harsh stuff, not too intense. That way it doesn't like sound over compressed.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
I call it like OTT no treble. That's what I think he called it. But I talk about this nonstop in the masterclass because it's just one of those things where when you're using digital sounds or things that are made and aren't like really full and analog feeling, you can throw that on it and tweak it a little bit. And it's almost like you're mastering a sound, right? You just like, you maximize it in a way that isn't overdone, but that isn't like underdone, which a lot of sounds are not there yet, especially presets from Serum and things like that. So the multiband compressor is probably the number one.
So you're saying, just to make sure anybody listening who maybe is a little bit newer or whatever, you would just turn off the high band on the OTT so you don't get that top fuzz? Okay.
Yeah, you turn off the high band and then you run it in parallel. So it's not like 100%. So you turn up the output, bring the mix down to like 50%. I think that's all it is. I might have tweaked the mid-range band a little bit, but for the most part, I go in and tweak it anyway, depending on the sound. So that's kind of the starting point. But you might be able to find, I honestly tried to find it and I couldn't find it, but the original video on YouTube where Company like shows how he did it. I don't know if he did it or if it's someone at Icon told him, I don't know, but no one really talks about it. And for an Ableton user, I swear it's like a secret weapon to make your crap sound awesome. But other than that, I mean, like I'll use other plugins native to Ableton. Like I'll use the phaser or the Redux or
Are you in Live 11?
Yeah, so I also have Max for Live. So I have a few like really cool Max for Live plugins I use. Like there's this one Max for Live device called like BIP, Bounce in Place, which allows you to have a traditional bounce in place option in Ableton. So rather than like BIP,
I haven't heard of that.
It's really cool. And I think it's like $10 or something, but rather than having to create a track, change it to resample, solo the track, resample to get audio, you just press one button that you map to your keyboard. Like I map 2 on my numeric keyboard and it does all that for you and just creates audio right there on a new track.
Oh, so it
renames it too.
Oh, so that's dope. So it's basically just like a freeze and flatten new track or resample instant.
Exactly. It's it does the resampling. So it essentially creates an audio track below whether you basically select either the group or the track that you want to be resampled. Nice. And then it'll create an audio track below, change it to resample, rename it to the name of that track, and then put like BIP and it'll record it. So it's just like a way faster way to get audio.
That's sick. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Everybody listening, I'll put a link in the show notes to that Max for Live device. It's by a guy named Cramp.
Yes.
Crampe. Maybe it's French. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. That's a good one. There's another one. You know what? I'm going to open up Ableton just so I know what it's called. But it's this other one where you can map any rack that you can create in Ableton to any key on your keyboard and it'll instantly load it. So like, for instance, in my template, I have it on my master channel and I've created everything from just like the utility grouped by itself, the EQ grouped by itself, to like full on processing chains or like Serum, Omnisphere. So basically like I can open up Ableton and I can just press 1 on my numeric keyboard and an EQ8 is there. Boom, it's on the track.
Nice.
Or I press 2 and a utility pops up with a Voxengo span and a metering tool that I use all the time. So it's just like quick ways to produce. And that's called.
Does that ever get in the way though if you're like trying to type values, automation curves or anything?
Well, so no, because I use the numerics on the top of my keyboard. So like above my like QAZ, WSX, above the actual keys, those 1 through I think 9 I have mapped and memorized. And if I need to type on the right side of my keyboard, I have like numeric.
Got you. There. So you can separate those two. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Although to be honest, I'm thinking about it now. I actually use 3 and 2 on that side for recording. Like I just have it key mapped in Ableton. Whenever I click 3, it just starts to record, and then 2 is the BIP, the bounce in place. I don't ever type. Like when I make music, like I'm never typing values. I'm just dragging it and being more like nonchalant with it. Because I just find that, frankly, like here, before I forget, this thing's called Shortcut Buddy, by the way, if you want to check it out. Just Shortcut Buddy V2. It's another live device. So that's a sick one.
I'll put that in the show notes as well, everybody.
Yeah, but Like I used to be super kind of like anal when it came to producing, and I just wanted it because I'm like an aesthetic Nazi. Like I swear, like everything about like everything from like me and Sarek's masterclass and the way our website looks down to, you know, the way my studio is, and I'm just very kind of OCD and tidy, and especially in projects. Like I'm not the guy to add a track, not rename anything, not color code, just go. I don't do that.
Yeah.
So
it gives me anxiety.
Yeah. I used to be really uptight with like automation and like being on grid, and I wanted everything to be perfect. But I started to realize that like the best way to train your ears and to get better at mixing and sound design is to like ideally pretend like you aren't looking at a screen, like to do everything and purely be making decisions based on how it sounds. Because a lot of times those little differences, like having automation slightly different here than it was there when you want it to effectively do the same thing, or like, you know, just random little things that you might like, like moving a sample like off grid a little bit, like that stuff makes it feel more human, makes music feel better. And I've just gotten a lot better at not worrying about that kind of stuff and just going for it and doing whatever's the quickest possible thing to do to get the idea across and whatever sounds the best. Like those are the two number one rules in like my studio. What's the fastest way to get this done, and how do I get it to sound as good as possible? They don't always overlap because sometimes to make it sound better, you got to spend a lot more time on it. Yeah. But, you know, I've just gotten way faster at making music. Like I can pretty much, anytime I'm given an acapella, I can have a fully mixed, mastered remix or song within 2 sessions max. Like that's just like my speed now. Like I mean, it might not be the final version. I might make like 4 songs and pick the best one, but I don't, you know, take 2 weeks to make songs anymore or months to make songs anymore. Because I think a lot of it's workflow, you know, and just being able to know what are my good sounds, what are good layering techniques, what's good composition, you know, how do I balance it, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I'm kind of the same way, and in some senses where I have to sit on stuff. Like I know I'm happier in the long term if I can go back and visit something multiple times because my perspective changes. And I'm sure you've experienced this too. Like I'll try to work fast on stuff because producing is more fun when you can work faster after you get enough experience in the technical side of it. But I find that for me, I'm happier if I can revisit something months later and then have a newer perspective and hear things that I didn't hear when I'm in like a long session just grinding on it. And I always come back to it with a fresh perspective. So for me, before I release stuff, I kind of like to sit on stuff for a little while because, you know, my mindset changes. I hear things I didn't hear before. But
I'm the same way too. Like, I guess I should have followed up by saying like, I can work that fast and I usually do, but the finish line is a combination of that and then revisiting and tweaking. Yeah. But those things are like more afterthoughts. Like I listen and I'll make tweaks. It's very rare that, you know, I create something that I'm happy with from like the main standpoint of like composition, sound design, like all of that, and like redo all that. Unless we just feel like the idea sucks and we need to make it better, then I'll kind of just start over. But usually like I'm sort of doing that check on myself as I make music. So I don't really like move forward in the process until I'm happy with something, right? Like the example was we're working on a remix right now. And last night we were together. Me and Braden meet up every Tuesday to work. And we like I probably spent an hour and a half, like 45 minutes, just coming up with the bass line for the drop and the sound design of that bass line against the kick and clap I was going to use for like a 4 on the floor beat, and then the vocal playing. Probably spent like an hour and a half. Like that's a long time to be spending on that. But once I nailed that and we were both like, hell yeah, that sounds great. It was so easy to do the rest. Like I opened up a couple arcades, opened up an Atmosphere, and within like 30 minutes, we've got like the whole first arrangement up through the first drop with sounds and like effects and everything. So it's kind of like you just got to put the focus and energy on the things that matter most in the song. And then the other stuff should be easy if your skills are up to par to like fill in. And I agree though. Like we definitely, like we have this one record that we're sitting on right now that's probably the dopest song we've ever made. It's like just really awesome. And I'm already in love with it, but I know it can be better. Like I know we could probably do a couple tweaks and make the mix better and all that. So right now we're just sending it off to people, getting feedback, getting insight from people we respect and you know, care about their opinion, as well as ourselves, just listening to it hundreds of times And, that song's not going to come out till maybe next year, middle of the year or something. So
Yeah.
we got plenty of time to like tweak it before we, send it off to labels and try to get a home for it. So I agree with you. Like it's always important to get fresh perspective. I just think that like that initial creative grind that you have for something, I've always found, at least in my world, is the most impactful, and you get the best work done on something. And that's just how it is for me. But yeah, it could be very different for other
No,
people.
I hear what you're saying too, with like getting that main bass line down, because a lot of the stuff you guys produce is like bass pop or like bass house kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that bass and that kick and that clap is what most people are hearing at the shows anyway. It's just like hitting them in the face kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's like when you have a good bottom, you can like build on it really easily.
Exactly. Like once I get a really good hook, or I get like the core of the song, like the feelsy part that like is the main line, once I get that down, it's mostly just tweaking, and it gets easier from there. And I find that's where a lot of people get lost in the sauce, is where it's like they just keep touching these little things. They're like, well, I don't know if that sweep is too loud, and they just like play with that for like 20 minutes. It's like, no, dude, you're fine. Like just keep moving on, really.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing that I feel like I don't even stress enough to like my students in the masterclass. But it's like, once the idea is there, it's either a good idea or a shit idea. And like once you get to the point where you can recognize, okay, this is a good idea, and then you get your skills up to par where you can just grind through and finish the idea. There's 1,000 ways to finish a good idea that'll all sound great. There's not 1,000 ways that idea can sound good, if that makes sense. Like you have to get the idea first. Once that idea is good, you can take it in a ton of different directions in terms of filling in the space and engineering it and doing all the little tweaks. That stuff isn't as important. That main idea, if that isn't good, then you got to scrap it and make it better, and then that's just important to note, because the amount of times back, I remember like 5-6 years ago, where I'd make songs and I would just be spending so much time on arbitrary things that the core idea was just so crap to begin with. It was like, what is the point? Like, what am I doing? It probably just helped me learn techniques, right? Like producing and stuff.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like it's just one of those things where you really got to nail those initial ideas,
Totally. For sure. I always tell my students too, it's like, don't clog the toilet of sound, because if something doesn't feel right, it could be a mixing thing. And sometimes people just keep like adding more layers on top of layers on top of layers until they think it sounds bigger. And it's like, sometimes the vibe is already there, but it's more of maybe just a mixing thing rather than just over producing, which I still find myself doing sometimes. I have to fight that.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny too, because like I'd say right now, probably like the person that I look to right now with the most like wow, like awe, like holy crap, like this person is just so much better than me in every way, is Maddion. Like it used to be Porter Robinson. I'm not as in love with his music that he's done the last couple years. So I think that's probably one of the reasons. I still love the guy and like love him as an artist and everything. I'm just not as personally into that type of music anymore. But Maddion, it's like everything he does, whether it's the visuals for his shows, the branding he does, but especially the music and the production, the engineering, like it's just always like, what the hell? Like, how does someone get this good at this? And like, it's so sick. So it's like, it's cool to note that like he doesn't even use Ableton to produce, really. He uses FL Studio.
Oh, really?
So,
okay.
Yeah. So it's like, I'm like kind of like, wow, like it really doesn't matter what, that just shows me like it really doesn't matter what you use. You just gotta get comfortable. He might use Ableton now a bunch because he does live shows. So he probably, I know he uses Ableton for that, and maybe there's elements of production he'll utilize Ableton for.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just one of those things where like, as you grow and stuff, you'll look at other artists and really analyze what they do more. And I learn a lot from like kind of stealing from other people and figuring out how they do stuff.
Oh, definitely. Honestly, being a teacher has taught me more than anything, because I'll be asked questions and I'm like, I never thought of it in this way, or I'll like work on a track with somebody and then I'll like think of something different and more creative, or they'll ask me a question I don't know the answer to and I have to go figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're the same way. It's helped me grow a lot just teaching. So with that being said, I know we're running short on time. We only have a couple of minutes. I was going to see if you would be willing to share maybe some of like your go-to tips as far as like production. I saw that you used Hook by Arcade for vocal samples and stuff, and I love that. I am using that for like little sweeteners and like background vocal fills and stuff.
Yeah, honestly, just Arcade in general. Hook is like one line out of, there's tons of them. I use that in every song. Like there's so much cool just sound design, ear candy, and like inspirational little loops and little things that like, you know, you just wouldn't make on your own, right? They're just little things that someone else who's really good at what they do creates, and they inspire you. I like to think of it as like back in the day, how producers would sample. I mean, they still do it, but more so they would like sample records and produce around like a hook or something. That's same thing with arcade. Arcade is basically like the modern way to do that. Mix with splice, like ease of use. Yeah. So I just kind of go, you know, hunting through there all the time. So I think that's a huge tip as a producer. Pay for arcade. It's like $10 a month. And there's no way there's anything more valuable than $10 a month, and like for what you would get out of that if you use it like properly and it works for your music. But in terms of like direct stuff, let me see, like really, like I kind of mentioned it before, but really focusing on the core elements of your idea. So I like to call it in the Hyperbits masterclass, we call it the 5 instruments of music. Like every song, basically, like at your main part, I call it a drop, call it a chorus, but even like in verses and stuff like that, you've got drums and like the rhythm section, bass line, harmony or the chords that create like the vibe, and then a melody, which could either be like a vocal or just a full-on lead melody. And then lastly, fifth, you've got like atmospheric and effects and just kind of like filler, like ear candy sound design stuff. So like those 5 things have to be satisfied first and foremost in a good way, and you got to be happy with that before you even care about anything else. Like it just doesn't make sense you wasting your time EQing a kick drum when like your whole idea isn't fully finished, right? Like that's usually the first thing I tackle in a song is I'll like go to the main part and I'll be like, okay, let me make sure I've built a full band here. Like here's a band playing and this is what it sounds like. Is that a vibe? And if that isn't, then I fix it. And once you have that, it's so much easier to extrapolate that, build out an arrangement, think about how you could manipulate any of those 5 instruments, sound design or compositionally, to like create interest over time. It's much easier way I feel of thinking about producing. So that's like a good tip on like composition. In terms of engineering, like probably the biggest tip is to just like chill out. Like I feel like everyone gets so obsessed and like there's so many plugins and like bells and whistles and all this shit you can do. Like I challenge anyone to make a song with just one synth, your DAW, EQ, and an EQ, like in levels, like balancing it with the volume. Like just use that, make a few records and listen to them and compare it to the things you spend hours and hours and hours with tons and tons of plugins mixing. And I guarantee like 98% of you are going to be like, wow, it sounds better, or it sounds just as good. And the reality is like your sound selection and your fundamental composition and the balance of your parts is by far the most important thing. And then EQ is right next to that because sometimes you need to make space, especially when you're layering. But like all the other crap, it's just like taking it from 85, 90 to 100%. Like it's not like going to make or break your song. Unless somehow your mix is so garbage that like it breaks the song. But if you have a decent mix and a really good song, that could be a number 1, right? There's plenty of songs out there that have terrible mixes that do really well commercially. If that's your goal with making music. And vice versa though, there's not a lot of songs that are mixed incredibly, but aren't good songs that do well. It's just like, it doesn't really work that way. Yeah. So it's just something to note, like, don't stress. Like there's plenty of resources out there, whether it's, you know, through free stuff on YouTube, through free stuff on our website, or even the stuff that we charge for, like something like the masterclass. That'll get you easily to an engineering standpoint where you make amazing, incredible, sonically sounding music. But the stuff you got to focus on is just coming to the table with cool, innovative ideas that are in really cool sounds that you're finding and using. That stuff and that's why we stress like sample packs that are really good and preset banks that are really good in the masterclass, because it gives you such a leg up when you're starting from a good place and building from there versus like trying to start from scratch every time.
Yeah, totally. That's one thing I wish I would have started earlier. Not like I have regrets now or anything, but starting with a great sample library in the genre that I'm producing is everything when you're starting out, for 100%. Sure. It's everything. And having an organized user library, which like literally I looked like a hurricane went through my browser when I first started. It was terrifying.
And there's so many resources now too, like whether it's companies like Cymatics or Splice, or we just released this preset pack for Serum called Mighty, which for like anyone who makes house music, it's like a bunch of house basses that are super dope. I spent like 2 months developing it. It's just like really awesome. And like,
is this a Serum presets
the
or?
Serum preset bank, it's called Mighty. You could probably link it in the description.
Okay, dope.
But like you could Google Hyperbits Mighty, it'll pop up. But
Okay.
like literally that is one tiny little company and a tiny little footnote of the internet. Like there is just so much stuff out there that's really, really high quality and good. You just got to spend the time to learn it and to, you know, be familiar with it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I'll include a link to the Hyperbits Mighty pack as well.
Right.
Dude, this has been sick. Thanks for hanging out, man. I actually, last but not least, you're talking about like getting your mix to match up against other tracks, and referencing is something that I think like a lot of people don't talk enough about. I saw that you had a cool hack with Ozone Match EQ and putting that on your master, and then just like having a reference track in Ableton and creating that EQ curve off of another reference track that Ozone
like
does for you.
Yeah, pushing your master towards another master a little bit.
Yeah. If any Ozone user out, try that with the Match EQ and play around with it.
Yeah, that's probably the one thing I could have said about more tips. Like a final tip is, yeah, referencing is just so huge. Like I can't even describe how much that improves your mixing and your mastering. Because being able to listen to something that you objectively love and know that you think sounds good, and then compare it to yours and make tweaks to make yours sound like it, it's just the most guaranteed way to be happy with your engineering and your mixing, and for other people to just instantly think it sounds good, because if they already like this other song, you know, they're gonna like yours in terms of the engineering and stuff. So
yeah,
that's a huge one. We talk about that like all the time as well in the masterclass. There's so many techniques for that.
sick, man. Yeah, referencing for the win. Dude, Zach, thanks for hanging out. This has been great, man. And I'll definitely include links in the show notes, everybody listening. Where is the best place for people online to connect with you and Braden and everything else you have going on?
Yeah, so I mean, you can pretty much just Google Syence, spelled Syence, and you know, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. Obviously, follow us on DSPs like Spotify, SoundCloud if you want to check out our music and you want to get access to the newest music. I'd say we're probably most active on Instagram, and but we also have a Discord server. So for anyone who's really into it and really likes the music, we have a Syence University Discord server that's growing. That's just like fans and other producers and other people that use Discord, which is a really cool way for us to interact. And that's like a more like you're directly going to talk with me and Braden all the time about stuff. Mainly Braden because he kind of runs it. But I'd say the best platform to keep up with all things Syence is probably Instagram. So if you follow us on there, that's probably one you could link, just because that's like where we post stories every day, always announce our new music, our new stuff we're working on, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I've just started following you as Philia Music and joined the Discord server, so I'll be hanging out in there too.
Okay.
Have an awesome week. I'll be looking forward to all the new tracks you guys will be releasing, and it's definitely stay in touch for sure. Everybody, check out the links in the show notes. As always, thanks for hanging out, and take it easy.
You too, man. Later, guys.
Yeah. Peace.
Is this gonna just go live on your website, or is it like YouTube or?
Yeah, it's going to be everywhere. So Spotify, YouTube, going to be, although actually they're rolling out Spotify podcast videos for everybody in like the next couple months. Yeah. So
that's tight.
I might have to go back through a backlog and upload everything. So it might be there in a couple months. Then Apple, everywhere else pretty much.
Spotify's killing it. They're also they just came to an agreement. They're going to start to do DJ mixes. So you can actually like legitimately play other people's music on Spotify, and they're not going to take it down for copyright violation. Yeah. I forgot how to do it, but yeah, so it's basically going to just start to take over as like, okay, now people can actually like post their mixes on Spotify, which is tight.
I wonder how they can fight like the whole royalty streaming.
I don't know. They probably just cut a deal with like label. They probably just cut a deal with the majors and say like, yo, like, we pay this amount to keep it. Or maybe there's an algorithm that like every time a song is played, it literally figures out that song, and like if there's revenue from it, they pay those artists. I don't know. It's probably read an article about it. So
dude, for real. That's brilliant. I'm gonna have to check that out. I'm glad you mentioned that.
I'll see if I can find the article, and when you send me an email, I'll respond to you with it if I find it.
I might leave this part in the podcast because that's kind of cool to know. That's kind of cool to know.
I guess maybe like let's verify the source, because I got sent an article from our team, and it was like saying that they were starting the process of this. So I don't know the legitimacy, but before you share it with everyone, but yeah, I'll try to find. You could probably Google it. I'm sure it'll pop up somewhere.
Yeah, I'll do some digging. I'll go into the Google abyss and find it.
Okay, cool.
Sweet, man. Cool. Well, it was good hanging out with you.
100%, dude.
Cool.
Nice to meet you. Talk to you soon.
Once again, everyone, thanks for listening to the podcast. Please share, like, subscribe, all the things. It would really help support me and give me the extra push to keep making more episodes every week. Check back every Tuesday. I'm trying to release a podcast every single Tuesday if I can. So yeah, I'll be here. Join the newsletter if you haven't. You'll be the first to know when new episodes come out, and I'll send you other cool content with Ableton Live and things. Just go to liveproducersonline.com/newsletter, and happy to connect with you there. Also, if you don't own the latest version of Ableton Live, I would be happy to hook you up with a deal. Go to liveproducersonline.com/buyableton, and you can save some money purchasing Ableton Live, because then you can buy more MIDI gear and other stuff that you don't need. Thanks everybody listening for the podcast. Make sure you check out Zach in the show notes and all the goodies that he has to share, as well as other links and stuff. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.